My mother was on her knees in the snow, crying and begging. Her expensive suit was soaking wet, her makeup running down her face in black streaks. 6 months ago, this same woman slapped me so hard I saw stars. She threw me out of the house in the middle of a blizzard and told me I was worthless. Now, she was the one begging me for help. The auction had just ended. I now owned everything. Their mansion, their vacation homes, their fancy penthouse in the city. Everything they thought would always belong to them now belonged to me, and I was about to take it all away from them forever. But before I tell you what happened next, before I show you exactly how I made them pay, I need you to do something for me. If you believe that karma is real, that toxic families get what they deserve, hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about people who refuse to stay victims. And comment below telling me what you would have done in my situation, because trust me, this story is going to test everything you think you know about forgiveness and revenge. Now let me take you back. Back to the night that changed everything. Back to the worst Christmas Eve of my life, which turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. 6 months earlier, the Vance family Christmas party was in full swing at our Hamptons estate. I say our, but it was never really mine. I was Elena Vance by name, only the eldest daughter who was more like an unpaid servant than an actual member of the family. While my younger sister Chloe paraded around in a $15,000 Valentino gown, I wore a simple black dress I had bought on sale 3 years ago. While my parents showed off their art collection to Manhattan's elite, I was in the kitchen making sure the caterers had everything they needed. That was my role. The responsible one, the invisible one, the one who held everything together while everyone else took the credit. The house was spectacular that night, I will give them that. 50-foot Christmas tree in the foyer imported from Norway. Ice sculptures melting slowly in the winter garden, a string quartet playing Vivaldi in the ballroom, fresh snow falling outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, making everything look like a scene from a movie. Over 200 guests mingling, laughing, drinking champagne that cost more per bottle than most people make in a week. Old money, new money, and people so rich they didn't bother counting anymore. I had spent 3 weeks planning this party, 3 weeks coordinating with florists, caterers, musicians, and decorators. 3 weeks making sure everything was perfect for my mother. Victoria's annual display of wealth and superiority. She never thanked me, of course. She never thanked me for anything. But I kept hoping that maybe this year would be different. Maybe this year she would finally see me, really see me, and acknowledge that I was worth something. I was checking on the dessert table when I noticed Brad was missing. Brad Ashford, my boyfriend of 3 years, the man I thought I would marry. He was supposed to be by my side supporting me through this exhausting evening, but he had disappeared about 20 minutes ago. I tried not to worry. The house was huge. He probably just got caught up talking to someone. But something felt off, that intuition that women have, that little voice in the back of your head that you ignore because you don't want to seem paranoid or jealous. I should have listened to it sooner. I should have listened to it months ago when I first noticed the way he looked at Chloe, the way she touched his arm just a little too long, the way they would stop talking when I entered a room. I went looking for him, room by room, my heels clicking on the marble floors. The house was a maze of wealth and excess, 20 bedrooms, indoor pool, home theatre, wine cellar that could double as a bomb shelter. I checked the library, the conservatory, the game room, nothing. And then I heard it. A sound coming from my father's study, a room that was supposed to be off limits during the party. I opened the door. They didn't even hear me at first. They were too busy. Brad had Chloe bent over our father's mahogany desk, her designer dress hiked up around her waist, his hands tangled in her perfectly highlighted hair. They were having sex in our father's private office during our family's Christmas party, while I was downstairs making sure everyone had enough champagne. I must have made a sound because they both turned to look at me. And you know what the worst part was? They didn't look guilty. They didn't look ashamed. Brad just smiled this lazy, satisfied smile and started zipping up his pants. Chloe, my baby sister, who I had protected and covered for and loved despite everything, actually laughed. I turned to leave. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, just needed to get out of that room, but Chloe was faster. She grabbed my arm, spun me around, and before I could process what was happening, she was screaming, not at me, for help. She ripped her own dress, creating a huge tear down the front. She grabbed an antique vase from the shelf, one of my mother's prized possessions, a Ming Dynasty piece worth over $100,000, and smashed it on the floor. Then she started crying these huge, dramatic sobs, and she was yelling that I had attacked her, that I was jealous and crazy and violent, that I had found her and Brad talking and gone completely insane, destroying property and trying to hurt her. I stood there in shock, unable to move, unable to speak. This could not be happening. This was not real. My mother came running in, followed by half the party. Victoria Vance in all her glory, Botox perfect dripping in Harry Winston Diamond's fury in her eyes. She took one look at the scene at Chloe, crying with her dress torn at Brad, looking concerned and protective at the shattered vase at me standing there with my mouth open. She never asked what happened. She never gave me a chance to explain. She just walked up to me and slapped me across the face with all her strength. The room spun. I stumbled backward, my head hitting the edge of the bookshelf. Pain exploded through my skull, warm blood immediately starting to trickle down my forehead. I touched my temple and my fingers came away red. "You pathetic failure!" My mother hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You have always been nothing but a waste of space, a waste of food, a waste of air. You could not even keep a man interested without humiliating this family. You are not my daughter." I looked at my father, standing in the doorway, surrounded by party guests who were now watching this disaster unfold. "Say something," I silently begged him. "Defend me. Tell her she is wrong." But Richard Vance, the powerful investment banker, the man who commanded boardrooms and closed billion-dollar deals, just looked away. He was a coward when it mattered most. Victoria snapped her fingers and 2 security guards appeared. She instructed them to remove me from the property immediately. When I reached for my phone, my coat, my purse, she stopped me. "You will take nothing," she said coldly. "You owe us for that vase. Consider your belongings payment for the damage you caused. And do not think about coming back. The locks will be changed before sunrise." Chloe was still crying, letting Brad comfort her, and she had her phone out. She was live streaming, broadcasting this to her 300,000 Instagram followers. The caption read, "Psycho sister attacks family on Christmas Eve. Send prayers." The guards grabbed my arms, dragging me through the house past all those people in their expensive clothes with their expensive drinks. All of them staring, all of them judging. Past the Christmas tree, past the ice sculptures, past the life I thought was mine. They threw me out the front door into the snow. I was wearing a thin cocktail dress and heels. That was it. No coat, no phone, no money, no keys. The temperature was -4 Fahrenheit, -20 Celsius, and it was snowing so hard I could barely see 10 feet in front of me. The wind cut through my dress like knives made of ice. The iron gate closed behind me with a sound like a prison door slamming shut. I stood there for a moment, blood freezing on my forehead, my whole body starting to shake from cold and shock. I could see the lights of the house behind me, could hear the music and laughter continuing like nothing had happened, like I had never existed. I started walking. I had no plan, no destination. I just walked because standing still meant dying. The snow was already over my ankles, my heels sinking with every step. I could not feel my fingers or toes. My lips were going numb. I was leaving a trail of blood drops in the snow, little red dots disappearing as fast as they appeared, covered by new snow. I do not know how long I walked. Time became meaningless. Everything became white and cold and pain. I started seeing things that were not there. My father's face in the clouds. Chloe laughing in the wind. I was dying and I knew it. Hypothermia was setting in. I was going to freeze to death on Christmas Eve, and no one would even notice until they found my body in the spring. Then I saw it, a bus shelter. Old, decrepit, probably not used anymore since the Hamptons had updated their public transportation system, but it had a bench and 3 walls that might block some of the wind. I stumbled toward it like it was salvation. I was not alone. There was an old woman huddled in the corner of the shelter, wrapped in what looked like old blankets and newspapers. Homeless, clearly trying to survive the storm the same way I was trying to survive. She was shaking violently, her lips blue, her eyes distant. And there were 3 young men, probably in their early 20s, drunk and looking for trouble. Rich kids, from the look of their expensive winter coats and designer sneakers. They were surrounding the old woman, pulling at her blankets, laughing as she tried to hold on to them. "Come on, Grandma, give us the blanket," one of them slurred. "We want to see if it will burn. It is Christmas, we need a fire." They had a lighter out, flicking it on and off, moving it closer to the threadbare blanket the woman was clutching, like it was the only thing keeping her alive, which it probably was. I should have kept walking. I should have minded my own business. I was bleeding, freezing, barely conscious. I had just lost everything. I had every reason to only think about my own survival. But I could not. I could not watch someone hurt this woman, could not watch them take away the one thing protecting her from the cold. Maybe it was because I had just been thrown out too. Maybe it was because I finally understood what it felt like to be completely powerless. Maybe I was just done being invisible, done being the person who stayed quiet while terrible things happened. I grabbed an empty beer bottle from the ground and smashed it against the metal frame of the shelter. The broken glass glinted in my hand, sharp and dangerous. "Leave her alone," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. The 3 men turned to look at me, this crazy woman in a cocktail dress covered in blood and snow, holding a broken bottle like a weapon. They laughed at first, but I moved forward, putting myself between them and the old woman, and something in my eyes must have convinced them I was serious. Or maybe they decided it was not worth the trouble. Rich kids like that never want actual consequences. They backed off, still laughing, calling us crazy bitches, but they left. I dropped the bottle and looked at the old woman. She was staring at me with these incredible blue eyes, sharp and knowing, despite her condition. I unwrapped the cashmere scarf from around my neck, the only thing I had left that provided any warmth, my mother's Christmas gift to me last year, probably the only thoughtful present she had ever given me, and I wrapped it around the woman's shoulders. "Do not be afraid," I whispered, my voice barely working. "I will not let them hurt you." Those were the last words I spoke before the world went dark. The cold, the injury, the emotional trauma, it all finally caught up with me. I collapsed into the snow and everything went black. I woke up in a hospital room that looked more like a 5-star hotel suite. Private room, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan furniture that belonged in a design magazine. For a confused moment, I thought I was dead, and this was heaven. Then the pain hit, and I knew I was very much alive. A nurse came in, checked my vitals, told me I was lucky to be alive. Severe hypothermia concussion, minor frostbite on my fingers and toes, dehydration shock. They had been monitoring me for 3 days. 3 days. I had been unconscious for 3 days. I had so many questions, but before I could ask any of them, the door opened again and she walked in. The old woman from the bus shelter, except she was not old and homeless anymore, or rather she was old, probably in her 70s, but she was immaculately dressed in a Chanel suit that probably cost more than a car, her white hair perfectly styled, her blue eyes sharp as diamonds. She sat down in the chair next to my bed like she owned it, which, as it turned out, she did. She owned the hospital. She owned half of Manhattan, actually. "Hello, Elena," she said, her voice cultured and commanding. "My name is Margaret Sterling. I believe you saved my life. Now I am going to save yours, but I am not going to make it easy." She told me her story, how she had built an empire from nothing real estate holdings across New York, worth billions, how she had never married, never had children, how she had spent the last decade testing people, going undercover as a homeless woman to see who in this city still had a soul, still had humanity, still knew how to help someone without expecting anything in return. In 10 years, I was the first person who had passed her test. "Most people walk by," she said. "The rich ignore me because I am poor. The poor ignore me because they have their own problems. But you, bleeding and freezing and abandoned by your own family, you still fought for a stranger. That is the kind of person I need." She pulled out a file thick with documents. She had already investigated my entire life while I was unconscious. She knew everything. About my family, about Brad's betrayal, about Chloe's livestream that had gone viral, about how I had been written out of the family in every way that mattered. "I am offering you a chance," Margaret said. 6 months. You work for me, you learn from me, you prove you can build an empire, instead of just surviving in the shadow of one. If you succeed, Sterling Properties is yours. If you fail, you go back to that bus shelter where I found you, and we never speak again. I should have been grateful. I should have cried and thanked her. But I was angry. Angry at my family, angry at the world, angry at myself for being weak for so long. "I do not want your charity," I said. Margaret smiled, and it was sharp as a knife. "Good. I do not give charity. I give opportunities to people who deserve them. Now get out of that bed. We have work to do." The next 6 months were hell. Beautiful, productive, transformative hell. I worked 18-hour days, learning everything about real estate, development, property, management, investment strategies, media manipulation, legal loopholes, and corporate warfare. Margaret was a brutal teacher. She did not accept excuses, did not tolerate weakness, did not care about my feelings or my trauma. I changed everything about myself, cut my long hair into a sharp, powerful bob, started wearing designer suits instead of trying to blend into the background, learned how to walk into a room and command attention instead of avoiding it, took self-defense classes so I would never feel helpless again, studied everyone who had ever wronged me, learning their weaknesses, their secrets, their vulnerabilities, and I watched my family fall apart from a distance. It was not even hard. They destroyed themselves. Chloe's livestream had backfired spectacularly. Someone leaked screenshots proving she had edited the caption multiple times first, posting it as a joke before changing it to make me look like the villain. Other videos surfaced of her at parties doing drugs, treating waitstaff like garbage. Brands started dropping her. Her follower count plummeted. Then someone leaked a sex tape, and suddenly she was unemployable and unmarketable, just another spoiled rich girl without the money to buy her way out of consequences. Brad was even worse. Turned out he had a gambling problem, a serious one. He had been stealing from my father's accounts for months, thinking he could win it back before anyone noticed. He could not. When the truth came out, my father fired him from the family firm and sued him for embezzlement. Brad declared bankruptcy before his 30th birthday. My mother, Victoria, made the biggest mistake of all. Someone, and I am not saying who, but Margaret had a lot of connections, convinced her to invest heavily in a cryptocurrency project. It was supposed to make her a billionaire. Instead, it was a sophisticated scam, and she lost $40 million in a week. $40 million that represented most of the family's liquid assets. The banks came calling. Turns out the Vance family had been mortgaged to the hilt, borrowing against their properties to maintain their lifestyle. When they could not make the payments, the foreclosure notices started arriving. First, the penthouse, then the summer house, finally, the Hamptons estate. I watched it all happen, and I smiled. 6 months to the day after Margaret found me, the Hamptons estate was scheduled for public auction. Margaret had arranged for me to be there. We pulled up in a black limousine, and when I stepped out, I barely recognised myself in the reflection of the car window. Designer suit, Louboutin heels, hair and makeup, perfect diamond earrings that cost more than my family's first mortgage payment. I looked like power. I felt like power. The auction was being held in a tent on the property, heated and filled with potential buyers. But I did not go straight there. First, I walked past the iron gate, where I had been thrown out into the snow. It was March now, daffodils blooming where my blood had once stained the ground. And there they were, my family, waiting outside like beggars because they could not afford the entry fee to their own home's auction. They looked terrible. My mother's hair needed colouring, her suit was off the rack, her jewellery was costume pieces. My father looked 10 years older, grey and defeated. Chloe was wearing sunglasses to hide her face. Her designer clothes wrinkled. Brad was not even with them, probably hiding from the creditors. They did not see me at first. They were too busy trying to convince some of the arriving buyers to loan them money. Please, Victoria was saying to a woman who had once been her friend. Just $2 million. We can pay you back once we get back on our feet. The woman laughed in her face and walked away. Then Chloe spotted me. Her mouth fell open. She grabbed my mother's arm, pointing, and suddenly all three of them were staring. I walked toward them slowly, my heels clicking on the pavement. Security guards flanked me on both sides. I stopped about 10 feet away, close enough to see every detail of their degradation, far enough to stay safe. Chloe recovered first. She ran toward me, probably planning to hug me or cry or play the victim again, but my security stopped her. She started yelling, "How dare you show your face here? This is our home. You have no right." I said nothing, just looked at her until she stopped yelling. Then Brad appeared from somewhere, pushing through the crowd. He had clearly lost weight, his expensive clothes hanging loose on his frame. "Elena," he said, trying to smile like we were old friends. "I knew you would come. I knew you still cared about me, about us. We made a mistake, baby. Let me make it up to you." I looked at him like he was something I scraped off my shoe. "I am sorry," I said politely. "Do I know you?" His face went red. "Baby, come on, do not be like this." Security moved him back. I turned my attention to my parents. My father could not meet my eyes. But my mother, Victoria Vance, she pulled herself together and tried one last manipulation. "Darling," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "Sweetheart. I know we made mistakes. I know I made mistakes. But I am still your mother. You are still my daughter. Family forgives. Family helps each other. Please, we need you." I let her finish, let her spin out her web of lies and fake emotions. Then I spoke, my voice carrying in the cold morning air. "You told me I was not your daughter. You said I was a waste of food and air. You threw me out into a blizzard and hoped I would die. So no, I am not your daughter, and you are not my family. Now please move aside. You are blocking the entrance to what is about to become my property." I walked past them into the auction tent. I could hear my mother screaming behind me, crying, begging. I did not look back. The auction started. The house had been appraised at $12 million. Bidding started at $7 million. Several developers were interested, planning to tear it down and build something modern. I let them bid against each other for a while, watching the price climb. $8 million, $9 million, $10 million. At $11 million, there were only 2 bidders left. I waited until one of them was about to win at $11.5 million. Then I raised my paddle. $15 million, I said clearly. The room went silent. The auctioneer confirmed. $15 million going once, going twice. 20 million, I said. There was actual gasping. The other bidders dropped out immediately. You do not fight someone who is willing to pay almost double the property's value. The auctioneer, looking confused but delighted by his commission, called it. Sold to Miss Elena Sterling for $20 million. I had legally changed my name. I was not a Vance anymore. I was a Sterling. After the auction, I stood outside and gave a brief statement to the press that Margaret had conveniently tipped off. I announced my purchase of the estate and my plans for it. I am converting this property into a rehabilitation centre and shelter for survivors of family abuse, I said into the cameras. A safe place for people whose families threw them away like garbage. A place where someone's value is not determined by how useful they are to others. And I am naming it the Second Chance House because everyone deserves a second chance. Everyone except the people who already had every chance in the world and chose to waste it on cruelty. The reporters loved it. The story went viral. Toxic family throws out daughter who becomes billionaire and turns their mansion into abuse shelter. It was everywhere. My family's name was destroyed beyond repair. But I was not done yet. They found me in the parking lot, all three of them falling to their knees in the slush and mud begging. My mother's pride was completely gone, now replaced with desperate fear. My father was crying, actual tears streaming down his face. Chloe just looked hollow. Please, Victoria sobbed. Please, Elena, we have nothing. We are going to be homeless. The banks took everything. We just need a little money, just enough to rent an apartment. Please, I am your mother. I could have walked away. I could have let my security remove them, but I wanted this moment. I had earned this moment. I rolled down the window of my car just enough to pass through a manila envelope. My mother grabbed it desperately, probably thinking it was a check. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside were documents, financial records showing years of tax evasion, proof of embezzlement from their own charitable foundation, evidence of fraud, and for Chloe specifically, documentation of drug possession with intent to distribute that would hold up in any court. My mother looked up at me, her face white. What is this? That is my final gift to you, I said. You have 24 hours to turn yourselves into the FBI before I submit this evidence myself. Prison has 3 meals a day and a roof over your head. It is definitely warmer than a bus shelter in December. But Elena, my father started. I am not Eleanor Vance anymore. I interrupted. That girl died 6 months ago in the snow. I am Eleanor Sterling now. And Eleanor Sterling does not have time for people who tried to kill her. I rolled up the window. The car pulled away. In the side mirror, I watched them collapse the envelope, scattering its contents in the wind. In the distance, I could already hear sirens. Margaret had arranged for the FBI to be waiting for my signal. Margaret was sitting next to me in the car, looking pleased. Well done, child, she said. How does it feel? I thought about it. I had expected to feel triumphant, vindicated, happy, but mostly I just felt tired and free. It feels like I can finally breathe, I told her. She patted my hand. That is the correct answer. Revenge is not about making yourself happy. It is about removing people's power to hurt you ever again. We drove back to Manhattan. I had meetings, scheduled properties to review a business empire to learn to run. My family would go to prison. They would serve time for their crimes. And when they got out, they would be forgotten just 3 more people who had thought they were untouchable until they were not. As for me, I had a new life to build. A life where I was not invisible. A life where I set the terms. A life where I protected people instead of being the one who needed protection. I never saw my family again after that day. I heard updates sometimes. My mother served 6 years, my father 5. Chloe got off lighter with 3 years because she cooperated and testified against them. When they were released, they moved to different cities, trying to start over with nothing. Brad moved back in with his parents in Ohio. I did not care. They were not my problem anymore. I ran Sterling Properties for 3 years before Margaret officially retired and made me CEO. By then, I had expanded the business into sustainable housing and urban development. I used my wealth to fund shelters, support financial literacy programs, and help people escape toxic families. I never married Brad, obviously. Eventually, I met someone who saw me for who I was, not for what I could do for them. But I never forgot where I came from. I never forgot that night in the snow, the feeling of being thrown away like trash. Every year on Christmas Eve, I spend the night at a homeless shelter, not as a photo opportunity or a publicity stunt, but as a volunteer. I serve food, I hand out blankets, I listen to people's stories. I remember that I could have died that night and someone saved me. I learned that there are 2 types of people in this world: people who use their power to lift others up, and people who use their power to push others down. For years, I had been surrounded by the second type, but Margaret showed me a different way, and now I spend my life trying to pass that lesson on. So here is what I want to know from you. Have you ever had to cut off toxic family members? Have you ever been the one who gave everything and got nothing in return? And if you found yourself with the power to get revenge, would you take it or would you walk away? Think about it. And while you are thinking, do me a favor. Hit that like button if this story resonated with you. Subscribe if you want to hear more about how people overcome impossible situations, and comment below with your own story, because I promise you, you are not alone. We all have wounds. The question is whether we let those wounds define us or whether we turn them into wisdom. This is Elena Sterling, reminding you that being thrown away does not mean you are garbage. Sometimes it just means you are too valuable for the people around you to appreciate. Find your worth, set your boundaries, and never let anyone make you feel small again.